This video is a part of a series. If you have not checked out part 1, I would encourage you to do so now. With that said, let's begin. When we returned to Shiroke and Farnese and Dog Guts, I kept forgetting about him last video. Sorry little buddy. They are in a forest of corpses and needling pines. The corpses are obviously a representation of a massacre of a band of the Hawk and the Eclipse. That much is true. The forest is a bit more interesting. My interpretation is one of two things. The first being that a forest lends itself to natural creepy and ominous imagery, which represents Casca's current mental state. It is sprawling and unstable. The second is more interesting. The last place, right before the eclipse where the Hawks had their last hurrah so to speak, was in a forest, against Wild. Aside from Zod, this was Casca's first real taste of an apostle battle up close and personal. I like to think that Miura intended Casca's dreamscape to be a timeline of sorts. Farnese and Shiroke go through her memories, and as they get deeper into the dream and closer to the source, the imagery changes to reflect what happened. Since the encounter with Wild was right before the eclipse, I choose to believe this was intentional Miura, and is the beginning of when the cracks started to form of the horrific event which was about to come. The little moment of Dog Guts looking out for Farnese and Shiroke here was nice too. Even Casca in her current state, no matter how much she hates and fears Guts, subconsciously understands the personal development Guts has gone over the years to accept others. Miura is all about the details in general in these final runs of the chapters within Casca's mind. A favourite of mine is how Farnese takes care to cover her neck at any given moment, because the sprite Casca is taking residence there, mirroring their real-world relationship. This is even reflected in the Volume 40 cover art. As we get closer to the source of Casca's dream, the more visceral the creatures that Farnese and Shiroke encounter are. We start with vague representations to begin with in the dream, such as the wings of darkness and the hairballs. But the phallic designs that these monsters take, well, they speak for themselves. Farnese even makes note of this, that the further they go, the more hostile the world becomes. Let's go back to the beginning. The creatures were only attacking the dream personification of Guts. When Farnese and Shiroke intervened and worked with this Guts, it was hostile towards everyone. Guts isn't the sole protector of Casca anymore. The whole party has gotten them to Elfhelm, and the two mages are helping because they care about Guts and Casca. The dream is getting hostile and aggressive because it is so used to only Guts being the one to take the brunt of a nightmare, but not anymore. Now everyone is helping fight the darkness. Miura uses the dreamscape to enhance Farnese's dream items in some visually exciting ways. The giant Musgo's head chanting its attacks such as God Press brings some much needed levity to the horrendous battle ahead. The contrast works very well and reminds me of Puck's implementation back in the early days when it was just him and Guts. You know, there's horrific sights, but there's a bit of levity and freedom almost to this section. I like it. However, as the group is about to approach the final fragment, a dark shadow looms, and I think we all know what this dark hawk represents. And just look at the scale that Miura incorporates here. The dark colours on the hawk combine with a harsh line work as the background presents an imposing creature which is moving at extreme speeds. I love the toxicity that Miura incorporates in tandem with its hawk design. The hawk is constantly spreading a toxic miasma as it takes flight, and this takes form as the various apostles involved in the eclipse. The representation of Griffith/Vemto in Casca's mind is no longer that of someone she swore loyalty to. Griffith was once Casca's whole reason for being, and he gave her the choice long ago to forge her own path. Now what we have is a literal poison. Griffith is this looming shadow, and in Casca's broken dreamscape is spreading the horrors of Eclipse for eternity. Shiroke puts it best here. These are the incarnations of Casca's fear itself. Let's loop this back to my previous observation. We are greeted with a page of Shiroke's magical fetishes fighting back against the incarnations of fear. The eclipse, which has always been represented as a hopeless act, is now being fought back against. Sure, this is only a representation, but it is a testament of how far the group dynamic has come in Berserk. Casca, and by extension Guts, are not alone in these horrors anymore. They have companions who will fight back against this darkness, at every turn. The Hawk goes straight down for the coffin, and I find this is interesting as Miura takes detail to remind the reader that Guts is still chained to the coffin, and it may be interpreted as a harsh lesson of the final acts of the eclipse. The act that Femto performed in the eclipse was a power play to assert dominance and power to Guts. Casca was her horrific means to an end. Her broken doll in the casket is nothing more than a base in which to chain Guts by Griffith. Casca already sees herself within her own subconscious as dead and forgotten, and the coffin, which Femto is so desperately trying to preserve, is nothing more than a prison for Guts, a trophy even, and that's very sad. Throughout the series, Shirokei is a much more conventional witch, so throughout this sequence it is expected to see that her magical fetishes that she took into the dream are the ones she's used throughout the series so far, but on a much more larger dreamlike scope. Farnese's fetishes, however, reflect her personal memories, so interesting to see magic defined in a new way, for example with the previous Moscus head, and now the Sylph Cape reflecting Serpico, and perhaps the most important part of the sequence, the Berserker armor, as it engulfs this dream version of Guts. Miura takes great care of making the Berserker armor on the Hound take on some interesting dreamlike properties. For one, the Dragon Slayer serves as the Hound's tail. Sorry Sith fans, no sword in the mouth for you today. This provides some neat imagery as the Hound tears through the Apostles with this picturesque shot of the Hound howling at the eclipsed moon as he does so. Also, eagle-eyed viewers may spot the Count being the one impaled here by the Dragon Slayer. Nice touch, Miura. As the Hawk of Darkness swoops back around, the hand cannon ejects from the Hound's mouth and shoots a fireball instead of a cannon shot that we are so used to. Again, Miura is taking some fantastic artistic freedom of using the dream setting to the maximum potential. The rules aren't following the conventional battles we've seen thus far in the series. It is a lot more freeform, and Miura has somehow managed to make another Berserker armor fight seem fresh and exciting due to the setting in which it is taking part. As the fireball connects with Femto, it reveals an image that we are so used to. His cold dead eyes, or eye in this case. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but Miura likes to relate back to the eye imagery for Griffith post-eclipse, as the eyes are the biggest visual indicator of how Griffith is now an unfeeling demon, or god hand in this case. It's interesting that damaging his exterior, that these cold eyes are the main point of interest to Casca within her own mind. After all, one of the last things she saw before her insanity, when Femto performed the horrific act, was that cold, dead, unfeeling stare. As Farnese and Shirokei bring the coffin towards the last fragment, Miura composes a fantastic shot of Femto versus Guts stalling in the background. The scale? It's something to behold. Femto is depicted as much larger and imposing compared to the Hound, which is something Miura commonly depicts of Guts' struggle to find Griffith early on in the series, and that his quest being almost meaningless, and the scale difference between the two here conveys this point perfectly, without words. As the Apostles loom on, unexpected help arrives, that from Flora. It's nice that Miura used this dream sequence for Flora to fulfill her promise to meet Shirokei again, in dreams. It's a touching moment and shows how far Shirokei has come in this journey, which Flora comments on. The wave of fire provides some visual spectacle to wipe all the Apostles away, and again loops back to the idea of creatures which first were thought of being impossible to fight back against, are being bested by the resolve that these companions have formed throughout this journey. As the duo begin to reach the final fragment, the sight is something to behold. It is that of a demon child. There is a lot to unpack here, but first, let's relate this back to the form that Casca's sprite takes when it asks the question, "There is someone I want to see." Remember, it is Casca as her current self, and not the Casca that was established in the Golden Age. The thing that Casca needs most to restore her broken mind is not resolution of the past, but acceptance of the future. The demon child is Casca's current link to the world post-eclipse. It is the entity she has had the most reaction and connection to, even further beyond Guts. What Casca needs the most to become whole is not to resolve the past horrors of the eclipse, but to push this darkness away and to find what matters most to her at this current point, now, and that is her son. And it's fitting that Miura saved this to be the guide to the last fragment, the final piece to the puzzle to restore her fractured mind. And I'm excited for the future developments of this throughout the series. The reader is then greeted with a visual horror of the cause of Casca's insanity. So much horrific imagery is at play here, including that of Ares apostles, poor Judo's death, Femto's eye, and a frantic Guts being pinned down at his most vulnerable. I love how the child is illuminated in the middle of all this horror, as a beacon almost. Her child, even if it is a demon, is her shining light in all of this, and to meet him is what she needs to heal. The memories of Casca are projected into Farnese, with the memory of Guts being pinned down and vulnerable by apostles specifically being highlighted. I'm very excited for future chapters to follow up on this. Guts in the party has always been portrayed as the hard center to move forward, the tough guy. But now that Farnese and Shirake has seen him at his most distressed, you wonder how this dynamic will change, and I'm excited to see this. We are then greeted with a beautiful, yet devastating double-page spread of a breaking of Casca's mind. Her body is slowly fragmenting apart, until it is but the broken china doll we're so familiar with in the coffin. I love how Miura portrayed this gradual decay. Casca's body is slowly being teared apart, until it is but a hollow shell. Everything she thought she knew and lived for, betrayed in front of her, before her very eyes. Instead of the process of her insanity being displayed as quick and destructive, the horrific act that Griffith did, literally, broke her into many pieces, which is even more sad. The more fragmented a mind, the harder it is to put back together. And based on Farnese's and Shirake's experiences thus far, I think they know that too well. The horrific memories of Casca's transformation are cleverly depicted by Miura to literally pour out to form the final fragment, a hexed heart surrounded by sharp vines. This shape, as noted by many Berserk fans, eerily resembles the idea of evil, but I don't want to look too far into that in this video, as speculating future events and fan theories is not really what I like to do here. I like to examine what is already there. I think the most important takeaway for the reader and the duo is that, despite fixing Casca back together again, her heart is still damaged. Shirake even notes that the heart is cursed, and that living through something so horrific whilst preserving her current self has injured her heart, perhaps permanently, and Casca's pain was so unbearable, and because the heart has taken such form, maybe she doesn't want to be restored. At least, this is how Shirake interprets Skull Knight's prophecy. Could this be true? We'll just have to find out. As the Hawk approaches, the duo decides to restore the final fragment, even if Casca's heart is still full of darkness and pain. Farnese notices the sprite is shaking in fear, and relates this experience back to her own past. Remember, Farnese turned to religion out of fear and isolation. She was someone who was once hollow, like this doll is now. She was just an ornamental figure for the Holy See, and followed blind devotion out of a sense of belonging and purpose, and now is seeing these similar feelings reflected in the sprite. It's difficult to recover from a nightmare, because one fears of learning how to live again after this. How is one meant to heal after all this pain? Farnese tightens her resolve. Has Guts helped Farnese understand how to live in a world of darkness? She will do the same for Casca. As Guts was to her, she will be the torch to light Casca's path. Farnese reflects with Shirake that this has been the purpose of their journey so far, to not let this adventure end in vain. Think about what fighting the darkness meant to Guts back then. It was a means of revenge and hate, but not anymore to this group. This party, as they are now, they fight with purpose. The point of this journey now is to destroy the horrors and let this nightmare end, to help heal a broken soul. As Guts began to accept others, this in turn has allowed them to restore the one he cares most about. Fighting in the cause of love has made this all possible. As the final fragment is locked into the doll, it restores Casca back to form. A cute visual of a sprite entering the door, right where the brand of sacrifice is placed, is presented to the reader. Farnese promise that they will meet again. The brand is the most painful representation of what Casca has gone through. and will continue to haunt her and curse her until her dying breath. Yet, the sprite, which represents the good in Casca, is residing in there. I believe Miura intended that no matter the hardships that this brand represents is literally a brand of darkness. The sprite, which represents the good inside Casca, will be the crucial element that Farnese will want to draw out in future events to blow Casca's darkness away, as the hound howls at the petals, signifying the end of a nightmare. For the first time in years, Casca is truly awake. This dream sequence was masterfully done. It didn't bring resolution to Casca's nightmares, but that's exactly what makes it great. The point was not to place a reset switch on Casca's mind, but for Farnese and Shirake to understand how these things happened to Casca, and that such a trauma can't be reversed. Casca is going to have to learn to live with this nightmare for the rest of her life, but unlike Guts, she will have companions to blow away this darkness every step of the way. The visual imagery that Miura presented was a constant treat, full of tone and meaning, which not only reminds readers of Casca's thoughts and feelings in previous arcs in a new light, but also helps set up important events for the future. As for the future, I'm going to leave you with this message from Guts himself. Even if we painstakingly piece together something lost, I guess it doesn't mean it will be back to normal. Once again, I thank you all for watching. It's been such a pleasure to discuss one of my favourite parts of Berserk. I'll see you next time.